rainy morning here, 9 o'clock in the morning, 9 a.m. here. Let me get my microphone straight up here. So somebody's been messing with this. All right, now we're back. Sorry about that. So, so we've got a lot to get to because, of course, arguably the biggest football weekend of the year was this past weekend. A lot of football. And we're going to talk Rams, and we're going to talk USC, and maybe some Lakers. Lakers are pretty amazing right now with Harash Markazi of the LA Times, friend of the show. It's coming up in a few minutes here on Sports by Brooks on Fancred, live from Los Angeles. I might add, our producer's Cam Smith, and also a first-timer, Andy Gresh, CBS Radio national host, and a local host as well in New England. And we'll get some Patriots talk, some NFL. Andy can be a little bit volatile and hyperbolic and opinionated. And that's why we're having him on, of course, because that's the way I could be at times. So never a dull moment on Sports by Brooks on Fancred. Do it every day, noon Eastern time. And I've been tweeting this morning. If you want to tweet at me during the show, that's fine. But we also have comments right here. If you're with us on the app for the first time, you can comment on the show. You can join me on the show by clicking on the fan line icon on the screen, and we'll pull you up. Did it last week. If you want to come on the screen and yell at me, no, don't do that. But if you want to come on the screen and comment, or you got a question, whatever it is, feel free to click on that fan line button, because we're here every day, noon Eastern time. And we'll be here for a couple of hours. We do this weekdays. And we're going to bring you stuff today that you may know about superficially, but we're going to bring you an extra level of stuff. All right. And we're also going to talk about things that perhaps you've already seen, or just in case you haven't seen them. So, but I want to lead off with the NFL and the Patriots, because that's what everybody's talking about this morning for the most part. For the most part, you got the amazing Saints-Niners game. You have the incredible performance out here in Los Angeles of the Rams yesterday. Wow, how about the Rams? Out of nowhere. But a lot to talk about in the NFL. But in particular, I want to drill down on the Patriots. And I want to start off with a video clip with our producer, Cam Smith. If we have that Patriots clip first, where we have a report from New England.
Chiefs in this
Let's go ahead and
Patriots
run that.
losing their second straight game, 23-16 to the Kansas City Chiefs in this AFC Championship rematch. It snaps a 21-game home winning streak for the Pats here at Gillette Stadium. The turning point in the fourth quarter, when 3 potential Patriots touchdowns were waved off by the officiating crew. The first, a Stephon Gilmore scoop and score that was blown dead before Gilmore reached the end zone. Then 2 offensive chances were negated. One for N'Keal Harry and the other for Jacoby Myers.
Keep playing unless the whistle is called, so that's what I did, and I heard the whistle. I was surprised, but, you just got to live with it.
I thought it was a touchdown. I'm pretty sure everybody else saw that it was a touchdown. It's something that's out of our control, out of my control.
A lot of the circumstances in the game, no point in talking about those.
It doesn't happen very often, so we still had a chance and wish we could have scored there at the end.
I was 99% confident I was interfered with, but there wasn't a call. I'm not trying to get fined.
At the end of the day, we all have a job, and we all get paid money to do the job and do it well.
And just like in 2014, after a loss to the Chiefs, the Patriots are on to Cincinnati. They face the Bengals.
We need to get him on the
Sunday.
show, by the way.
Reporting from Foxborough, I'm Ian Steele.
Get him on the show. So here you go. There's the Kelsey. There's the good angle.
No question.
Yeah. Missed that call. No big deal. Don't worry about it. Yeah, not a missed call or anything. Oh, we don't have enough officials on the field to see that, and we don't have replay. Oh, wait, we do. And here's N'Keal, and this was probably the most egregious of them all over the weekend and during the game. Here we go. And there's an interference call that wasn't called. And so that is our Patriots report. Now, I want to run something else from the Patriots game, and it's a rundown of Tom Brady's performance in that game. It's a short clip of Tom Brady's passing, some of his passes during the game against the Chiefs. You can go ahead and run that Tom Brady clip when you get the chance. And here we go. Not that great a quality on my end, but I thought I'd put this together for you. A little bit of Tom Brady, a highlight or low light, I guess, depends on how you want to look at it, medley from Tom Brady. And I'm trying to, yeah, it was a struggle. It's been a struggle all year. But so as you could see, Tom Brady having a lot of trouble against the Chiefs. And we're not talking about a Hall of Fame defense or secondary, to say the least. Defense, not a strong suit of the Chiefs. But against the Patriots last night, yesterday afternoon, they were pretty effective. The point in showing you this is we're caught up with the officiating, but we're caught up with the officiating in every game, especially big games. How many big games can you name in which the officiating wasn't a point of contention after the game? I can't name any, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. This is Brady. We're still going. We're still going. And so this is not to say it's all Tom Brady. It isn't. When you don't have receivers that can get separation, and when you don't have guys out of the backfield that can create a threat in the running game, these things tend to happen. Especially, though, when you have an aging quarterback and everybody knows what's coming because it's been going on all year. So that's Tom Brady yesterday. You saw what everybody is talking about, right? What everybody isn't talking about, though, is what I just brought up. And I want to read some comments from the referee from that game last night, Jerome Boger, who talked to ESPN last night. And I'll read some clips. I'll read some quotes from Jerome Boger, the referee from last night. First of all, he was asked to explain why the N'Keal Harry play was ruled short of a touchdown. And here's exactly what he said. He said, what led to it was the covering official on the wing was blocked out by defenders. The downfield official who was on the goal line and looking back toward the field of play that he stepped out at the 3-yard line had that. Let me repeat that. The downfield official who was on the goal line and looking back towards the field of play had that he stepped out at the 3-yard line, N'Keal Harry. So they got together and confirmed on that. The final ruling was that he was out of bounds at the 3, right? In other words, the covering official on the wing was blocked by defenders, right? The downfield official who was on the goal line and looking back towards the field had it that he stepped out on the 3. So clearly he wasn't on the goal. I mean, if he was on the goal line, how did he miss that? There's a disconnect there. I don't know what Boger's talking about. You know, more likely, if you went back and checked the tape, he's probably into the end zone. So his depth of field distorts where Harry was on the field. Otherwise, why would he not rule that Harry was, why wouldn't he rule that he was in? Because he was in. It was obvious. So, so there you have it. And so additionally, Boger, the referee, was asked if he thought ruling it a touchdown was a possibility. Since they missed it, and they kind of knew they missed it, we just got the explanation. They were fuzzy because the covering official was blocked. Boger was asked if he thought that perhaps they should rule it a touchdown because that would trigger an automatic review. And Boger, the referee, answered that question by saying, quote, "Not really. Those two officials who were covering it, they look at it in real time. This case was unique in that the guy who would have ruled touchdown had him short. So maybe if that ruling official on the goal line had a touchdown, we could have gotten into that. But he thought that the guy stepped out of bounds. The goal line wasn't in play, right? So, in other words, getting it right is the last thing on our mind, right? It's CYA in this situation. And that's typical. I'm glad that we got the referee to comment on this and tell us specifically what happened. What happens when you get blocked and you can't see the play? Boy, that never happens in football, right? Guys aren't moving around on the field. You never get your view blocked if you're an official. No, you do probably every play. And so obviously they didn't get it right, and the Patriots paid the price. Belichick had already spent his 2 challenges, so he didn't have the opportunity to challenge at that time, so we didn't get a replay. Absurd, totally absurd. But that's where we are, and we've learned this year with these pass interference reviews now as a response to what happened in the Saints-Rams game that that's a farce. When the league gets involved and tries to legislate or tries to at least give the appearance that it is righting a wrong. My philosophy on this at this point is that, and this is to me the issue. It's not about the Patriots, right? I mean, it is about the Patriots and the Chiefs. And if you listen to sports radio today or watch television, watch the talk shows on ESPN, Fox, that's all people are going to talk about is that game. And they may throw in the officiating. If they're talking about this game, they should. But I think the bigger picture is, the more important picture is, why is it every single game we have to go down and worry about the officials, right? Not to mention, now it didn't happen in this game, but how the reviews slow the game down. It's really gotten to the point where it's taking over the game, and it's gotten much worse this year for whatever reason, has it not? So this is the moment when you either have to have a sky judge at the game, or you've got to rig up the goal line with some sort of electronic sensor, whatever it is, and all of the yard lines. I mean, why do we have the chain gang in 2019? I think we've really got to take a hard look at technology, at lasers, at whatever it is. I mean, they've had it in tennis for how long, Cam? Our producer, Cam Smith, how long have they had sensors to tell you if a ball's in or out in tennis? They've had it like 30 years. Where's the NFL? Especially in lieu of, this is a huge distraction. Yeah, it's like 25 years they've had it at Wimbledon and the U.S. Open. How do we not have that, at least for a first down? This should be automatic on the goal line. Automatic. It should be automatic on the sidelines when you're out of bounds or in bounds, whatever it is. Period. Now, you may hear this conversation, and because all of the people that you watch all day, every day, don't bring that up, that doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen. That doesn't mean that wouldn't make the game better. It absolutely would. We wouldn't have to worry about this stuff. And it actually, I mean, if you look at baseball, give me 1 second. It's freaking really hot in here. I mean, to me, what happened in baseball with the strike zone, that's a revelation to see what they're capable of doing, and then how accurate the umpires are. The home plate umpire, it's pretty remarkable. Not everybody, Marvin Hudson, many others, but there's a few others. But if ever there was a game where having that sort of technology, I mean, we've got cameras and mics everywhere. The technology for that is second to none in the NFL. But, and then you think about all the the broadcast companies that you're dealing with, all of that. I mean, it goes without saying that the NFL could have cutting edge. How can you have all this money? Look at the stadium. Look at the Falcon Stadium. Look at the Mercedes-Benz. I mean, is that the most ridiculous stadium you've ever seen? How do we not have basic tech? We got the chain gang out there. It's like 1946. You know, how is that possible? And so what do we end up talking about today with the Patriots? What are they talking about today in New England? I know what they're talking about. They're talking about what we just showed you. But what they should be talking about is how to fix this. I'm not somebody who is, the Patriots are getting what they deserve, considering their dynasty started on a missed call, right? The tuck play, all that, right? Or things like that. I mean, you go through Twitter. It's a great way to see what people are saying, thinking, with the memes and the response and reaction. And 99% is Schadenfreude on the Patriots. So speaking of the NFL, speaking of football, we're going to go out here in Los Angeles, stay in LA, and talk to Arash Markazi, friend of the show, LA Times, esteemed columnist, man about town. And it's a big town here in LA. Arash Markazi. And Arash, I can't thank you enough for dropping in, man. Thanks so much.
Of course. Always a pleasure.
And you're on television, like every day now?
I try to be. So that's why I'm in a suit. So I'm doing Spectrum today. I did Channel 2 yesterday. So like a little bit of everything, but it's fun. It's good.
Well, how much now, when we were talking about Los Angeles, how much time do you spend like traveling around? I know it depends, but typically, do you spend a lot of time in the car traveling around?
Yeah, but then also I'm going to Las Vegas tomorrow for UFC week. If there's anything big happening in like Las Vegas. But yeah, I'm usually driving around, driving to downtown, driving to a practice. I usually try to do something. Again, as you mentioned, there's so much happening in Los Angeles, whether it's a game or a practice or a press conference or something.
It's ridiculous. I mean, I look up and, hey, Anthony Davis, 50 points. All right, 20 and 3. I mean, there's so many other things going on. I want to get to that in a second, but there's so many other things going on. And namely, as an SC guy, as I know you're an SC guy, I've been dying to hear what you think about what's going on at SC and Clay Helton. So give me your take on what's happening.
I mean, I just never thought it would be possible to have a new president, a new athletic director, and then for them not to bring in a new head football coach. And I don't think Mike Bohn is telling the truth when he says that he didn't talk to anyone. I mean, I don't think you wait 10 days to just look at what Clay Helton has done. But just in general, you're talking about a guy who's 13-11 in his last 2 seasons. I think there's a very good chance when you look at the bowl game and the first game the next season that he'll be 13-13 over his last 26 games. That's a 500 coach. He's not a bad coach. I think there are some schools that would like to have a coach like a Clay Helton. He's not a USC coach, and certainly not a USC coach if your expectation is to contend for national championships.
I think it's unbelievable. And when you think about why they stuck with Helton, do you think it had to do with they couldn't do any better, or was it the amount of the buyout, or were they just pretending to do a search? Is it Carol Folt has taken over, and that could be the situation where she just doesn't want to make a move? I mean, what is the reason that they didn't, hire somebody? It just makes no sense.
I mean, I think if you're talking about a $20 million buyout, you will do that for a big name coach. And I do think maybe that whether or not they actually reached out to Bob Stoops and reached out to other people, I mean, I think unless you can get a big name coach, I don't think in their mind that they were going to do the buyout to get a head coach at a smaller school or like assistant coach. So they kick the can down the road for another season. The problem with that, Brooks, I think USC is going to be good enough to be in the Pac-12 championship game next year, maybe even win the Pac-12. And then at that point, like, it's really hard to fire the coach if they win the Pac-12, right? So, yeah, I don't know. I think every now and again, he'll be just good enough to keep his job.
Visiting with Arash Markazi, Los Angeles Times columnist. I don't know. This is something that I think people don't talk enough about. I think people outside of LA or outside of the Pac-12 may be wondering, but why is it that, I mean, when you look at his record, why are we talking about firing the guy? You tell me, what are your reasons, Arash, why you think he should not be the coach next year?
Well, again, you're talking about a guy who was 13-11 over his last two seasons, really should not have kept his job after going 5-7, worst season since Paul Hackett was the coach. I think anytime you name, right. For first time since Paul Hackett, that's not a good comparison. The other thing, Brooks, I mean, he's really hurting the program in terms of recruiting. USC historically recruits itself. It should always be certainly in the top 25, but like in his best years in the top 5, top 10. So for them, currently speaking, to be, I think, the number 67 or 75 or whatever the ranking is, I mean, they're not in the top 50. And then not only that, the top 30 California recruits, not one of them is committed to USC. Again, they're going to Alabama, they're going to Clemson, they're going to all over. So you're not even keeping the kids in state. And now people are decommitting. I think there were kids who thought, oh, okay, maybe I'll commit to USC and they'll have a big name hire. That's not the case. So he's hurting the program. And as you know, recruiting is the lifeblood of any college football program. And so not only is he not winning on the field, he's hurting the team in terms of recruiting.
I want to know what you think about this offense. Obviously, Slovis looks like he's a great prospect and could be a breakthrough quarterback for SC. Of course, we don't know what, and this, of course, is despite Clay Helton burying him on the bench. But we also saw Fink step up off the depth chart and play well as well. So you've got Graham Harrell sitting there. Helton, to me, has proven he's not the offensive guru because it hasn't happened under him. It's been a function of the talent of the quarterbacks. But what do you think about Graham Harrell? How crucial was he or is he to the offense? And it certainly appears as if he's going to leave here as the offensive coordinator. But what about Graham Harrell? What was his role in the offense? What's your perception of that?
I mean, he brought that whole system in place. Again, Cliff Kingsbury was going to bring that program or that system. Graham Harrell did. And if they lose him, which it looks like they might, what assistant coach are they going to get? Because Clay Helton, despite having a few more years on his contract, is kind of like a lame duck coach. So what high-ranking offensive coordinator is going to hitch his wagon to a coach who may not make it through next season? Again, if they struggle. And the big thing to keep your eye on, and we talked about what are the reasons why he should not be back. There are over 20,000 empty seats per game at the Coliseum. You're talking about a school that has new suites, new club seats that they want to fill that place up. People aren't showing up. People are really upset about this. So there's so many season ticket holders, longtime season ticket holders who are not going to come back. And so, again, if they begin next season, for example, 1-2, and you're talking about 40, 50,000 people at the Coliseum, I mean, that's a bad look.
That's a disaster, and it makes that $20 million buyout look a lot different. Visiting with Arash Markazi, the Los Angeles Times. So I want to talk quickly about the Rams, and you've done a lot of work on the new stadium with the Rams. And so as the Rams are continuing through the season, obviously they had a huge game yesterday, played extremely well, but how important is it for the Rams to be a good team as they're going into the stadium based on what that situation is? Because it certainly sounds like it's a disaster financially at the moment for Kroenke.
Yeah, I mean, it's massive because you're having to sell season tickets and personal seat licenses, and I think that's why they've really swung big on whether it's Jalen Ramsey, whether it's these big moves that they've made. I mean, you need to have one of these more star-studded teams, certainly in Los Angeles, but certainly moving into this $5 billion SoFi Stadium, you have to sell those tickets, and I think. You know, the moves that they made are really kind of saying, hey, we want you to pay top dollar for these tickets, but also we're paying a lot. So the problem, Brooks, is like they're giving a lot of money to some players who are not producing this season. They are in the position that they are because they made Jared Goff the highest paid quarterback. He's not even in the top 10, top 15 quarterbacks in the league. And then Todd Gurley played well on Sunday, but I mean, going into that game, you're talking about a guy who was getting about 60 yards per game. So they need those players who they're paying a lot of money to start producing.
Now we got the Chargers, and you've got the situation with Rivers. You got the situation with Gordon. It looks like they're not going to be around when they go into this new stadium. What's the status of the Chargers? I mean, we've heard talk about them moving, the situation with the Spanish. I mean, that's a mess too. I mean, what's your thought on the Chargers going into the new stadium and where they are right now as a franchise?
You know, the Chargers are in a more precarious position because they're not in playoff contention. They're a below 500 team. And that was the worst case scenario. I mean, they're coming off a 12-4 season where they played really well. They won a playoff game, but they have not moved the needle here in Los Angeles. Nobody cares about them. And their tickets, you could basically get a $50 per game season ticket for the Chargers. So, I mean, they're doing their best to try to build that stadium, but you've probably seen the pictures and the video and all of that. I mean, every game that they play at that StubHub Center or Dignity Health Sports Park, it's a road game for them, whether it's the Packers, whether it's the Steelers, whether it's whoever. So they're in a tougher spot. I think the Rams have moved the needle here. I think they are slowly becoming Los Angeles' team once again. The Chargers, they are still viewed as the San Diego Chargers.
Could we see a new team name, a rebranding of the Chargers, and or still moving the team? I mean, what do you think about the Spanos' role and the possibility of rebranding that team?
I've told them from the get-go, you have to rebrand because in their mind, they view this as we're a part of Southern California. So we have fans here. Like, we're not going to change the Chargers name. I said, no, listen, you will always be viewed as the San Diego Chargers. Course. You were the San Diego Chargers for 56 years. So you have to rebrand. If you want to be successful in Los Angeles, you have to rebrand. Basically, do what the Cleveland Browns did when they moved to Baltimore, where you leave that history, right. You leave your trophies, you leave all that behind. And if one day San Diego gets a stadium and they get a team, that would become the San Diego Chargers. But the idea that you're just going to be like the Los Angeles Chargers and try to pretend, yes, they were first in Los Angeles, but they were literally here for 12 months. I mean, nobody remembers that. So they're viewed as San Diego's team. So I don't get the sense that they were going to do that. I also don't think they're going to move soon. Listen, they're moving into this new $5 billion facility. And whenever you hear about, you know, maybe they should go to London, maybe they should go somewhere else, where are they going to go?
Mexico City.
They can make as much. Mexico City, maybe. Yeah. We'll see. I mean, by the way, that was the closest thing that they've had to a home game all year.
Right. Well, these people should. Yeah. I mean, it's a bizarre. I mean, the funny thing about Spanos is, I mean, he's so brazen and so absurd and ridiculous and gets upset when people just bring up possibilities that make more sense than moving to Los Angeles from San Diego as he did.
Yeah.
But even now, he doesn't want to leave that history behind. Sorry, you really can't have it both ways. Exactly. We're talking to Arash Markazi, a columnist for the Los Angeles Times. Let's talk quickly about the Lakers now. You look up and they're the best team in the NBA. What's going on with that team? What's going on with LeBron? What are you seeing?
You know, he said this before the season that Anthony Davis, the team should run through him, which kind of was surprising to hear LeBron James say that. But we forget that Anthony Davis has been, over the last few years, one of the top 5 players in this league. And I think because he was hurt last year and he demanded a trade, we forgot that. But you look at what he did last night, 50 points. I mean, he is the best player, I think, on that team. And again, you're talking about a team with LeBron James. So they got 2 of the top 5 players in the league, and they like to play together. And again, you would think that all these new pieces would take time to gel. But from the beginning of training camp, from the beginning of the preseason, they've felt there's this connection. And so they are the best team in the league. And again, like, they look good on paper, but the way that they've been playing all season has been incredible.
All right, what about the Clippers? Because I think there's a lot of, and we're going to let you go. But last thing about the Clippers, a lot of confusion, I think, about the status of Kawhi with the load management. Is he really hurt? What's the situation with his injury and why he's doing this?
His knee is hurt to the point that the league is okay with what they're doing, because generally speaking, the league does not like the idea that you're not going to play a player who's healthy. But I think his knee is hurt to the level that the league is satisfied with what the Clippers are doing. They're good enough to beat 90% of the league if they have one of those 2 guys, Paul George or Kawhi. As we saw against Milwaukee, though, they're not good enough yet if they're both not playing or they're not on the same page. I mean, Brooks, I think they've only had like maybe 2 or 3 practices together. Yeah. At some point when you're playing against elite team that catches up to you, it'll be a fascinating matchup on Christmas night, though, because in my mind, those are the top 2 teams in the league still. But the Clippers are not playing as well together yet, just because they haven't played enough games and had enough practices together as the Lakers.
Now, when you look at Houston, it looks like that's not going to work ultimately.
Yeah.
This is my opinion. Even in the playoffs, they've got a lot of time. It looks like they want to try to work together, but it's just not going to work. Is that the similar situation with Kawhi and Paul George, or is that going to be closer, Kawhi, to the LeBron and Davis thing?
No, I think
together.
Kawhi and Paul George will work. They like playing together. It's just like an issue with that load management thing, and you're not having enough practices together. I mean, LeBron and Anthony Davis have practiced together. They played together, so they've really gelled quickly. I do think Kawhi and Paul George will have that same connection soon.
Thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks for fitting us in today. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Brooks.
Awesome. That's Arash Markazi, Los Angeles Times columnist, does a great job. I mean, he really does. He's one of these guys that does his homework, goes all over the city. He's at all the events, knows everybody. And I'm not exaggerating. This isn't just a cliche. Oh, he works really. No. He's been around forever. Young guy, though. Started off with the Daily Trojan as a columnist at USC. I've known him that long, over the course of almost 2 decades. And so it's really a gratifying thing to see someone who has pounded the shoe leather, as they say, in journalism. And now he's an LA guy if there's ever been an LA guy. And right now, there's never been a better time to cover LA sports here in Los Angeles. Cover it. I didn't say there's never been a better time for sports fans necessarily. But when you look at the situation at SC, and we've talked about it quite a bit, and we're going to talk about college football for a bit here, because I've got some things I want to address, especially the coaching situation, what's going on with the college football playoff, what happened last weekend, all those things. But, and USC has been a big focus of the national media, this show, of course, and we've been out front on everything. And when you go back and you look at what's happened over the past 2 weeks, you have heard a lot of different names, but you heard the name Bob Stoops. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you haven't been on Twitter. Maybe you haven't looked in the media. But Bob Stoops' name has come up as someone who talked to USC, and USC didn't have the money to pay him. And I'm here to tell you that didn't happen. It did not happen. The guy that USC had targeted, was interested in, was James Franklin, right? And Franklin did not reciprocate the level of interest that SC wanted to see. There was a perception out there, I've been told by my sources, that Franklin wasn't as into the job as they wanted him to be. And there was a perception that he might be using them. Of course, this is what college coaches do, for leverage to get a contract extension. So, I mean, look, if you're USC and you're in this situation, all right, you've got to go to James Franklin and say, let's make this work. Let's figure this out. This is, to me, a turning point for the program at USC, a turning point right now. Then this is not to say that it's not correctable. I think the good news for USC is they didn't make a stupid hire like, let's say, Arkansas made over the weekend in hiring Georgia's offensive line coach, Sam Pittman. You know, USC didn't do that. So it's good they didn't. And they're keeping their options open. Arash had an interesting comment during our interview here on Sports by Brooks on Fancred, where he said, had USC snagged a big-time candidate, well, it would have made the buyout, easier to do, to pay for. The $20 million buyout to Clay Helton, which makes total sense. But from what I've been told, and this includes in the aftermath, over the weekend, over the last 3 days, it was a possibility that they could get Franklin. They just didn't push hard enough. They wanted Franklin to be crawling on his hands and knees to USC, and that's not going to happen. And so the it's really tragic, because another element to this that the media is not reporting, which they should be because it's important, is there have been people at USC, alumni, prominent figures in the administration, who have desired to have an African-American head coach. When you look at the fact that we've got 10% of major college football coaches are African-American compared to the percentage of players, which is well over half of the players in college football are African-American. We've got like 10% of head coaches. That's absurd. So USC had this opportunity with Franklin, who has a track record. So to me, you do what it takes. You figure it out. You figure it out. Is Franklin perfect? Is his resume? Of course not. Has he had problems in the past off the field? Yeah, some. Do I like him personally as a coach? Not really. But as far as USC is concerned, you're not going to get a better opportunity anytime soon than James Franklin. You're just not. And so the fact that they didn't go to the mat for that opportunity tells you all you need to know about who's running USC and what the priorities are. I'm not criticizing the priorities necessarily. USC within the faculty and administration has been a total disaster. And so it makes sense that they're very cautious in everything they're doing right now. But in this particular case, it's backfired, because clearly you've got a president and an athletic director who really aren't in tune with the rest of the school in the situation. This is not a situation where you have a OBGYN who, got in big trouble, and now USC is, fired him and paying out hundreds of millions of dollars because of a civil suits. That's not what this is, right? I understand that Carol Folt, the president, is all about propriety, coming in here and giving off the appearance to the public that USC has changed. But this situation, right, is not like those other. And there's other situations. Obviously, they're involved in the college admissions scandal, right? So this was an opportunity for USC to, I think, make a statement. And they had an opportunity with a guy, and they blew it. I'm here to tell you. They were also talking and had talked to Tony Elliott, the offensive coordinator at Clemson. I can confirm that. That hasn't been reported. But I know for a fact that not only did Carol Folt talk to representatives of Elliott on numerous occasions as it pertains to this head coaching job in the last month, but that Elliott had been in contact, or not Elliott himself, but representatives of Elliott had been in contact with officials from SC for well over a year, because this has been going on forever. The speculation about Helton and being let go. And if it was up to the people who really fuel the school, the donors, Helton would have been gone after last year. And this year didn't change anything. In fact, it made it worse, because the recruiting is now fallen off a cliff as opposed to last year. It was a little bit better last year. Now, we're not quite to the signing day yet, so don't count USC out. Cam Smith, our producer, Cam, you know this. I mean, USC has been well known lately, at least, for making these remarkable comebacks at the last second to snag recruits. But you just heard Arash Markazi mention that the top 30 recruits right now in California, none of them are going to USC. That's outrageous. It's outrageous. It's egregious. And you're not going to fire that guy? What? Right. And the guy, his offensive coordinator, who brought in the scheme that created this consistent offense, finally is leaving. Graham Harrell's leaving. Helton's coming back. His offense coordinator, Harrell, is leaving. So you don't see that next year is going to be worse than this year? I mean, Arash was saying, I guess predicting that SC was going to have a good year next year. They might, but they're not going to do it without Graham Harrell, in my opinion. I mean, who are they going to get? They're going to have some turnover, perhaps with the defensive coordinator, Clancy Pendergast. For a lot of people, that's way overdue. And so, man, I could go on and on and on about Helton. It's absolutely ridiculous. A big part of this, too, is, by the way, thanks to our producer, Cam Smith, right now, when it comes to commitments for this recruiting class, let me repeat, this recruiting class, Clay Helton at USC, his team, school, is 86th in the nation and 11th in the Pac-12. 11th in the Pac-12 in recruiting. This is ranked by the 24/7 composite index that takes into account all the recruiting services, right? USC is 86th today. And we're going right down to the wire to signing day. And they've got one 4-star recruit on that list who's an offensive guard. That's it. No 5 stars, one 4-star. And one skill position player, a 3-star wide receiver. No running backs or quarterbacks have committed to USC, right? Let that sink in. Like I said. So I'm not a USC fan. I'm out here following the team. It's kind of inexplicable. And I just feel like this is Carol Folt. It has to be Carol, I guess. I don't know. But so they had Tony Elliott as a possibility. So if you want to go cheap, but a very good candidate, better than the guys who are being hired. Let's put it this way. Over the weekend, since the season ended, the best head coaching candidate who is a candidate and is interested in head coaching jobs, the best candidate has not been hired. He's still out there because obviously Tony Elliott, the offensive coordinator at Clemson now, feels like, I don't know. I don't know the situation, but you would think if he's not getting hired by Arkansas or Missouri or whatever, when Arkansas is hiring the offensive line coach at Georgia, Sam Pittman, with no head coaching experience, and unlike Tony Elliott, no coordinating experience, that's who Arkansas just hired. But you've got Tony Elliott over here, who's a big part of the Clemson offense and is the guy, I might add, who is pulling recruits out of California. That's the guy, Tony Elliott. African-American, right? Dabo Swinney's right-hand man. Now, Jeff Scott is going to be hired to take over as head coach at South Florida. He's one of those 2 co-offensive coordinators at Clemson. Elliott's the other one. And I can tell you that Scott leaving is not a big loss for Clemson. And him taking the South Florida job, I think, gives you kind of a clue into where Dabo Swinney is on him, because that's a low-profile job for someone who was a longtime staffer under Dabo Swinney. He's been there since 2008, Jeff Scott. So when you look at that South Florida landing spot for Jeff Scott, don't extrapolate that or analogize that to Tony Elliott. Tony Elliott is in a different place. Here's the other thing about Tony Elliott. I was told, I've got independent sources, multiple independent sources on this. I was told roughly 3 months ago, the same guy, offensive coordinator at Clemson, Tony Elliott, was essentially interviewed Tony Elliott by the Cowboys, Dallas Cowboys, not during the season, but the Cowboys are interested in hiring him as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, Tony Elliott, right? Let me backtrack on that. I'm not saying Tony Elliott personally met with the Cowboys. I'm saying representatives of Tony Elliott have met with the Cowboys. Stephen Jones, Jerry Jones, not the coach himself. But the Cowboys are interested in hiring. This is the best way to put it. The Cowboys are interested in hiring Tony Elliott as their head coach. I heard this months ago. Again, I want to reiterate, if you're media out there listening, I did not say Tony Elliott is personally one-on-one interviewing with the Cowboys himself. I'm saying representatives of Tony Elliott have been contacted by the Cowboys about the head coaching position there months ago. And he's in the mix as a possibility. Is it going to happen? I don't know. Now, I was kind of hesitant to bring that up anywhere, whether it was on Twitter, because it was a little fantastical. Even though I had independent multiple sources on it, that's a little fantastical when a coordinator. But then again, if Cliff Kingsbury has a job, number one, it's not. And more so, if Freddie Kitchens has a job, who's never been a coordinator at any level, let alone a head coach, he gets the job with the Browns. I mean, Tony Elliott is infinitely more qualified than Freddie Kitchens, if not Cliff Kingsbury. So why not? So what happens in the past week? In the past week, if you haven't heard, Jane Slater of the NFL Network reported that Tony Elliott, same guy, is a candidate for that head coaching position. I should have known better. I should have brought him up earlier, right? But that's what I've heard. And to reiterate to SC fans, and like I said before, at least SC didn't hire somebody like, say, Lane Kiffin. I mean, again, or Sam Pittman, which we're going to talk about that here in a second, of both Pittman and Kiffin. And I'll explain to you what happened there, because Arkansas and Kiffin, those jobs, those situations are related, even though Lane ended up at Ole Miss. But at least there's still an opening there, so to speak. I mean, Clay Helton is essentially a placeholder. If he isn't, he should be. And so we'll see what happens. I will say this. It's not going to be Urban Meyer. And it's not going to be James Franklin in the future for different reasons. As I said on Twitter today, I think Urban Meyer is going to be the head coach of Notre Dame in 2021. That's my opinion. That's a guess based on what I've heard from people who have talked to Urban Meyer, and Meyer has invoked Notre Dame. He's invoked Mac Brown's name. I've said this on the show many times. If you're on this show listening every day, you know what's going to happen well before it happens. Here on Sports by Brooks on Fancred, every weekday, noon Eastern time. Coming up, we're going to talk to national CBS radio host Andy Gresh. There's a lot to get into with him about the NFL, the Patriots. He's up in New England. We just got done talking to Arash Markazi, LA Times. We usually have a lot of guests, but on Mondays, we try to go a little lighter because there's so much going on. We ran some film for you of the Patriots and the bad calls and Tom Brady's performance. And I just want to say one thing about the Patriots, because we were not quite finished with what was going on with the Pats when Arash joined us. And that is to say that I hearken back to Tom Brady's public comments and demeanor this year and throughout, which started probably halfway through the season, when he started to make clear he was really unhappy, even though the record has been good. I thought from the first time he did that what he was in part saying was, guys, if we don't clean this up on offense, we're screwed. We're not going to make it to the Super Bowl with this team. I think that's really what he was saying. It wasn't like, wow, I deserve better. I should have weapons. I mean, Tom knows, Brady knows they've tried. It's not like they haven't tried. They've tried to bring guys in. They've tried to do different things to facilitate that. It hasn't worked out. But I think Brady has kind of foreshadowed what we're starting to see. And they're still on top of the world. I mean, what can you say when you've won 10,000 games in a row at home and this snaps the streak, right? 21 games. I mean, what are you going to say? Well, they've won all these games before. But that's what we do on this show. You know, we're way out in front of people, just like we were about the Rams before anybody else was early this season. But when I look at the Patriots now, this to me has the earmarks of the beginning of the end of the Patriots. I mean that seriously. And I know people have eulogized him many times in the past, too many times to name. And I know that situations looked worse in the past, especially as it pertained to injuries. And they've got a great record this year, and they're still in a very good position. And they still have that horrific, dumb schedule from the awful division they play in, which is the godsend, which has been able to aid them when they've needed it, and will continue to do so as we head down the stretch. Their schedule isn't exactly murderer's row to end the season. But I think it's pretty clear by now that Brady is going to be checked out after this year, right? And if that's the case, you know, what's going to happen this year? For the very first time, it sounds like Tom Brady really isn't fully. I mean, how can you say he is? You've got all these reporters, all these people who are plugged in, really plugged in, people who have been deferential to Brady in the past, New England media, national media, saying, looks like he's out of here. Okay. Well, if that's the case, where is he right now? And then we see this kind of rhetoric and this kind of demeanor publicly. Tom Brady, right? So we're to believe that even though he knows he's probably gone, he's going to be fully invested, knowing that he's gone. And more specifically, more importantly, what does that say about what Brady thinks of how he's being treated? Why would he leave? Why? I've been down this road so many times on this show already about him and how people just blind themselves to behavior, like whether it's Brady, Jerry Jones, there's so many out there. They believe what they want to believe, I guess, or they look at everything in a vacuum, and they have absolutely no recent historical perspective. But, you know, Brady's hallmark is preparation, investment, being a leader on the team. And now you're not really seeing that outwardly. I'm not saying that he isn't. He obviously is still. But you combine that with the fact that he doesn't have weapons. He's getting killed. He's screwed, basically. Has nobody who can stretch the field, not even close. He's got no tight end, and he's got no running back who are playmakers. The closest thing he has are slot receivers. That's about it, right? And you've got Belichick sitting back there, clearly satisfied. I'm not saying he's satisfied with the offense. He's not. But I don't think it's killing him to have the defense get most of the credit for what's happening this year. Now, as they start to go down the tubes, if that happens, if the season doesn't end well, the playoffs don't end well, you know, that I'm sure that would change in his mind. But right now, I don't think it's killing him. The defense is so prominent in what the Patriots are doing. When was the last time the defense really led the way? As we look back on one of the 6 Super Bowls, was it all defense? I mean, that's what we have right now. And that's a dangerous game. And I don't know. I think when you look at, when you look at Brady being the GOAT, this is what's really hard for me to deal with. Everything is fueled by the media And the betrayal of Brady as this mythic, great player, Hall of Famer, transcendent, Saint Tom, right? And it just doesn't jive. This isn't a criticism, but I'm thinking to myself, how is this not a bigger deal? It's such a big deal, the Super Bowl. His career is such a big deal. The all-time 100 greatest players is such a big deal. Belichick is the GOAT. Kraft is the GOAT. And they are the GOAT. They clearly are. But how is this not a bigger deal? That we're not talking about Brady leaving every single day. That we're not potentially talking about the demise of the Patriots. Maybe we will in the next week or two if they keep losing. But I see it now. It's happening. You saw the film of Brady. That was a disaster against the Chiefs. And the Chiefs' defense is pedestrian at best. If that's not a sign that the Patriots are in trouble, and I think Brady's trying to tell us that, somehow we're not listening. It's all Belichick. And let me just tell you, think about this. Think about, I guess one of the answers to my question when I say, why is this not a bigger deal? Why is there not more deference to Brady? I think there never has been. And Brady, to a certain extent, I think has to blame himself for not demanding it. Of course, it's this great dilemma and paradox that Brady deserves to be deferred to that much more by an organization, a franchise, much in the way the media certainly defers to him, but he doesn't get that from the Patriots, and he never has, and that's a function of Belichick. He's got this wonderful owner who he loves and has this familial tie with. That's fine. But he's made sacrifices, clearly, and hasn't made a big deal out of his contract. And so how do they thank him now? I'm not saying they should give him a long-term deal, but I am saying that a guy like Brady, under these circumstances, shouldn't be playing for a contract. And if ever there was a good reason for him to leave, it's that. Nobody talks about it. Nobody. To me, you can't say the guy is the GOAT and he's still clearly a good player, right? Without mentioning what the F is Belichick doing? What is Kraft doing? What are they doing? Right? And you can't have Brady in the situation with the Netflix show. What happened? That conversation without bringing up he's playing for a freaking contract. What? You know, when you look at what's going on in the field right now, and now we're talking about him leaving, and nobody's saying, hey, Bill, what's going on? Why don't you lock him up? Of course, Belichick would rather, be too early in cutting a player or trading a player than be too late. And that is part of his genius. I'm not questioning it. All I'm saying is you better be ready to jump on the Jared Stidham train if you're a Patriots fan, because that's what's coming. And I'm not hearing anything about it. That's what's coming. And I don't think it's going to be a pleasant break with Brady. I used to think everybody does. Everybody does. How could Brady be in another uniform? But now, remember on this day where you heard this, I think it's an absolute certainty that Brady will be playing next year for another team. And that this whole idea of him going out as a Patriot is absolutely not going to happen. It will not happen. And if you're Brady, right, and you have apparently this great relationship with Kraft, I'm not saying he doesn't, right? If you're Brady and you've got all of these unprecedented career, it's unprecedented in something that is so hyped by the media. So if you're him, you're a god. You're beyond a god. You're a myth. You're the GOAT. Everybody defers to you at all times. But then you're not deferred to. Not only that, you're hung out to freaking dry on national television in this situation with this offense. It's a disaster. And not to say that I haven't tried. Belichick has to. So if you're Brady in that situation, how could you not leave and go somewhere where the team is going to be more deferential to your needs and what you want? Of course. There would be a lot of teams out there who would be interested. I think when you look at this situation and you look at the past and how things have gone in the past, a great example would be Joe Montana, who ends up with the Chiefs. Right? This has happened over and over again. But this, to me, is the greatest example. And let me just tell you, I hope Belichick stays for a long time with the Patriots. Bill, to me, what you have here is, I want to say one more thing on the Patriots. What you're and I brought this up to a lot of the local guys that we have on in New England. We have a lot of them from Boston. We're going to have some more this week, hopefully. We're going to have somebody right now coming up here in a few minutes. Andy Gresh, CBS Radio. He's up in New England. But I really think what we've got setting up here is a succession plan where it's Steve. It's going to be Steve Belichick. Bill's setting it up. If that wasn't the case, he would be coaching somewhere else. He would be head coach at Bowling Green or something. I don't know. West Point or an assistant. So I don't know. I just think it's when you see Bill with the pen and the paper out, that sort of involved. I know we got Mayo and I know it's the Patriots way that you don't have any identity individually on staff and everything. Everybody's always floating and fluid. And that also pertains to Brady. I recognize that Brady understands that too. But just the offense, that's an extreme situation right now. But I think that we're looking at a succession situation. And I don't know if it's a product of the media just being so overwhelmingly deferential and afraid of losing access that we're not hearing more talk about that. Especially though, you've got national hosts who don't need the access, but then again, they work for, I suppose, the NFL because the NFL pays their employer who pays them. I don't think that's why. I think we're just blinded. We're blinded to, I don't know, blinded isn't the word. How can you say that Brady is this GOAT, and he is 6-time Super Bowl winner, and this, once in a lifetime situation with the Patriots, and he still is a pretty good player, clearly. And you're hearing him tell you, essentially, I'm leaving because I'm not happy. That's essentially what he's saying. And that's what a lot of, national people are reporting and local people are reporting. How's that not a bigger deal? That's, to me, the story, because that explains what's going on the field. That's a big part of it. You can't talk about what's going on the field without bringing that back up. And nobody is really confronting anybody about it. And I understand Belichick and Brady, they're going to ignore it or, pretend, whatever it is. But, what's going to end up happening is we're going to wake up one morning in the offseason and Brady's going to be in a Chargers uniform or a Bear. Who knows, I would say the Chargers, you would think, if ever there was an opportunity going into that new stadium. Who knows, though? And I'm sure SoCal, he's California, but he's Northern California, but he's a SoCal guy too. Tom is. I don't know. I just think that it's such a huge story, and I'm puzzled by the lack of attention to Brady's status on the team right now and the future. So we'll address the Patriots a little bit more with Andy Gresh, who's going to be joining us from CBS Radio here in a bit. But right now I want to talk about and I know there's a lot of college football fans on here, and I want to bring up the Memphis job right now because what I'm hearing, I was talking to sources this morning on the phone, and what I've heard is that Hugh Freeze, as you would expect, is in play for the Memphis job. I don't know if anything's broken on Twitter. I need to have like TweetDeck up in front of me here or something on a screen scrolling through. But if anything's happened with Hugh Freeze today, but Hugh Freeze is in play for the Memphis job, and that's definitely something to keep a close eye on. So let me see here. And so I think what we're going to do is we're going to have somebody on, by the way, from most likely that region, like the Mid-South region, Ole Miss, Arkansas area, and Memphis and whatnot. I'm going to try to get somebody on tomorrow to talk about this, who's plugged in and connected about what's going on. But Hugh Freeze, I'm hearing from my sources, is in play for Memphis. Not exactly a revelation, right? His agent is Jimmy Sexton. Freeze has not signed an extension with Liberty. Not that that really matters. It really doesn't. But, and he would crawl to Memphis to take that job. And Jimmy Sexton's Mr. Memphis, his agent, who is the most powerful man, arguably, in college football. Yes, that's what I just said. Jimmy Sexton is agent. So keep that in mind. Hugh Freeze in play at Memphis. It'd be great to see him at Memphis. And Norvell, of course, did a great job. That's a good hire by Florida State, as good as you could expect with Florida State because of, the fact that Florida State should be a blue blood program, much like SC. But the facilities, they're not horrible, but they're not as good as, not even close to a Clemson, if you will, or other schools like a Florida in that region, Georgia. Florida State's a level below in facilities. You've got the aftermath of the Taggart disaster, and I'm not blaming Willie Taggart for that. I'm blaming Florida State. You've got a search firm, DHR, which is essentially running their search because you've got a president and an athletic director who are there temporarily and are state house administrators with no college athletics experience. And they're giving us deadlines as to when they're going to hire somebody, which is the worst possible thing you could do. You've got a booster situation, which was unlike any other in college football, in that the booster club was not part or affiliated in any way as part of an athletic association with the university as a private organization, right? That booster club, or I don't want to call it a club, the booster organization at Florida State, every college football school out there, and for decades and decades and decades, has a private organization that's made up of the boosters. And it's out of that organization that they fund scholarships. But they also operate an organization that helps to hire coaches, fund coaches, salaries, you name it, all those things. That needs to be a private organization, so you can't access that information if you're a reporter through FOIA. Well, Florida State hasn't had that. They're like the last school, and they finally buttoned that up. Finally. And so, like I said, you got a lot of weird stuff at Florida State for a school and a football program with a ton of history and success in a prime area for recruiting, obviously. So for them to get Norvell, that's a good hire. They did. I would say they did better than Ole Miss in Arkansas. Ole Miss bringing in Lane Kiffin. So what happens there is Jimmy Sexton he's Norvell's agent too. He's Saban's agent, you name it. Big time client. Well, that's not necessarily the case, but I mean, he's not Franklin's agent, but he's Clay Helton's agent. And he's the one that negotiated the $20 million buyout with the dummy athletic director at the time, Lynn Swan, athletic director in name only. So you've got Jimmy Sexton representing Lane Kiffin. And of course, Sexton is a Memphis guy, as I said before. He is. Even though they have CAA's office is in Nashville. And I know he works out of there as well. And out here in Los Angeles, CAA. But so Sexton is part of this big, vast agency, CAA now. But he's representing Kiffin. The Arkansas job's open. The Ole Miss job is open. And he's talking Sexton on behalf of Kiffin for the Arkansas gig, the head coaching gig, and Ole Miss. And I told you this last week, but my sources told me that Matt Luke was fired, not because of the dog pee thing or anything like that, because they wanted Norvell, and they knew they had a short window. And so what happened was Luke is fired. Ole Miss waits to see if they can get Norvell. In the meantime, Kiffin is interested in the Ole Miss job, but he's also interested in the Arkansas job for obvious reasons. He's at FAU. So he engages Sexton on behalf of Kiffin, Arkansas. Eventually, Norvell turns down Ole Miss, justifiably so, goes to Florida State. And now Kiffin goes back to Arkansas, Sexton does, and says, we want Ole Miss. Ole Miss has given us a better deal. And so they went to Ole Miss. That's what happened. Sexton's just doing his job. I'm not here to demonize the guy or criticize the guy. He's just doing his job. You've got athletic directors. It just depends on the school. See, Sexton trades and traffics in this stuff. It just depends on who you're dealing with. School to school, they're all different. It's the Wild West. Like I said, you're dealing with Florida State. You're going to get a great deal if you're Sexton because you have administrators that are clueless. You've got somewhat of a disorganized booster situation. More so than most schools, right? But it's a legacy powerhouse school, Florida State. So that's a good situation for Sexton going in. If you're Sexton, let's say, hypothetically dealing with an Alabama or an Auburn, it's a different situation. It's going to be not necessarily a more difficult situation. Depends on your client, what the state that the program's in at the moment. But dealing with those schools who have established structure set up and how they deal with situations, right? And they've got the maximum amount of resources available, but they have people that are in control of those resources that are pretty well schooled on how the business works, whereas Florida State isn't right now, at least. So everything's different. But he ends up placing Kiffin at Ole Miss. That's what happened. And Sam Pittman, who's the offensive line coach at Georgia, ends up being hired at Arkansas. He's not represented by Sexton, and I'm sure he was hired for a song. I told you last week that Gus Malzahn was 50-50 as to whether or not he would go to Arkansas. And remember, I told you about Norvell going to Florida State. Well, Arkansas was in that same spot with Malzahn. What you haven't heard people talk about on Twitter or in the media, if you're tuning in here for the first time here on Fancred, our mobile streaming app, welcome. But if you're interested in this situation, Malzahn is repped by Jimmy Sexton. And Jimmy Sexton, I might add, represents many athletic directors. Many. Talk about a conflict of interest. I'm not the first person to say that, but when I told you before, the most influential guy in college football, that's what I mean. So, but Malzahn indicates he's not interested in going to Arkansas. And the big reason is he himself would have had to pay a $7 million buyout. Gus would have to leave. And Auburn wasn't about to negotiate that. There had been speculation that perhaps Auburn would come off the $7 million, go in half and say, okay, Gus, if you really want to go to Arkansas, let's do 3.5. Well, that didn't happen. And so Gus was stuck, and he's going to stay at Auburn. So they hire Pittman. Pittman is not a good hire for Arkansas. Arkansas, to me, the people in charge don't recognize what they have in that program. And there's no other way to put it. It's not personal, but I mean, when you have an athletic director coming out publicly and trying to sell you on a hire at a good program, Arkansas, at times it's been a great program, and they're telling you the guy is a great recruiter and a big personality, and the players will love him. He'll win the players over, right? When that is the primary justification for hiring an SEC coach, you're going to want to run to the hills. That's as red of a red flag as you can get. No, he doesn't have any head coaching experience. No, he's never been a coordinator. He's an offensive line coach. Oh, but he was a great recruiter. Okay, where was he a great recruiter? Well, he was a great recruiter at Georgia. Really, Georgia. Great recruiter at Georgia, where Kirby Smart is one of the best recruiters there is and is personally involved in recruiting more so than most coaches. And then you have the facilities, and you have what's going on at Georgia, right? Not saying that Pittman's not a good recruiter, but in the past, if you look at his resume, it's not as if he was this transcendent recruiter before he got to Georgia. I've done the homework. So you brought in Chad Morris, if you're Arkansas, from SMU, who had a very spotty, checkered head coaching resume at SMU. He'd been a good coordinator. He'd done well at Clemson. He was sold as this transcendent recruiter. Chad Morris was. That's what he was going to do. He was going to bring in big-time players into Arkansas, Chad Morris. And what happened? It was a total disaster. And so if you're Arkansas right now, I'm not saying you've got to go hire a. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying what you need to do. And maybe Pittman's this guy. Somehow I doubt it, but maybe he is. The kind of coach you have to hire right now, if you're Arkansas, is a coach who is a very good talent evaluator, right? Talent evaluator, and a guy who is very good at player development. All right. More specifically, you've got to hire people who are good at that. Sam Pittman will rise or fall based on his staff. That's not breaking news. But in this case, he can't afford mistakes in the way that an LSU coach like Les Miles over the years could afford mistakes. There's a lot bigger margin of error for the head coach at LSU. I mean, LSU, Les Miles kept his job there for years, and he was a horrible offensive coach. They had a horrible offense, which makes LSU's offense today such a revelation to people because, okay, now they finally have a real offense. So if you're Arkansas, that's what you got to be focused on. And maybe that's the guy. So speaking of the guy, Sam Pittman, let me introduce you to Sam Pittman. All right. So Arkansas, the athletic director there came out and tweeted a little video of him and Sam, their new coach, over the weekend. And so we're going to show you a quick little video of that. And maybe we'll show you a video that also includes Pittman in the past as the Georgia coach. Some of the things he's tweeted out. It also turns out, and you'll see this in the video, that Sam Pittman, the guy that Arkansas just hired, had at one point blocked the official Arkansas Twitter account for football, which you'll see in this little short video. So our producer, Cam Smith, if you have that clip of Sam Pittman, go ahead and play it. So this is Sam Pittman.
You got something to say?
Yeah, I do. Go Hogs! Yes, sir!
Hey, Coach Pittman, you got something to say?
Yeah, I do. Go Hogs!
There it is.
Yes, sir!
That's, I guess, when he was at Georgia. Now, here he is at Georgia.
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's the new coach at Arkansas. There's Kirby Smart.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Great. New coach at Arkansas, head coach. It's their guy.
Yes, sir.
That is cute, though. The dog's cute. I'm a Georgia guy, by the way. I went to school there, played football at Georgia. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Players will love him. Great recruiter. Players will love him. No head coaching experience. Never been a coordinator. Offensive line coach. Right. That's Arkansas. That's who they hired. Okay. So, wow. If you're just tuning in, you're like, what? What is that? It's like, was he sending that to his like daughter? Does she have like a baby or something? No, that's going out to the world from his official account. And to, I guess, I don't know, for recruits or something. That's how they recruit, or that's how he's a great recruiter, remember. So now I also want to show you a video of Lane Kiffin. Of course, to me, there's a couple of big stories over the weekend in college football. Obviously, what happened in the championship games, everything that took place. And I'm really excited about the college football playoff in that I'm excited because I'm looking forward to the Clemson-Ohio State game, because something in the back of my head tells me that Ohio State, and it wouldn't be the first time, especially in the context of the college football playoff, that Ohio State really isn't as good as we've been led to believe. And we've seen glimpses of it in the Wisconsin game in the first half against Penn State, in the second half, in the first half against Michigan, especially on defense. That, you know, Clemson, I might remind you, has won 28 games in a row, and I don't care who they're playing. I don't care who they're playing. They've won 28 games in a row, right? I have a feeling Clemson is going to boat race Ohio State, and everybody will be shocked, right? I mean, how Ohio State is ranked ahead of Clemson in the CFP tells you everything you need to know about the influence of the Big Ten. By the way, if you're hearing someone say that, forget about Clemson, that Ohio State deserves to be above LSU in number one, right? The odds are that person works for Fox, because, of course, the Big Ten Network and the Big Ten broadcast for football, that's Fox and Fox Sports. They do the Big Ten. That's their thing. ESPN and CBS, they're the SEC. And I'm listening this morning to Fox Sports Radio, but over the weekend, the only people, and it's unbelievable, that are advocating that Ohio State's ahead of LSU are people from Fox. It's ridiculous and so obvious and embarrassing. I want to show you, by the way, Lane Kiffin, when he was hired, some videos went out, as they always do. God bless Ole Miss, by the way, for hiring Lane Kiffin. Could there be a better spot for him dealing with all, Saban and all that stuff going on in the SEC? I mean, Tennessee's right there. So many amazing things are going to take place with Lane Kiffin. I have no doubt. No doubt. So I'm excited. That's part of the big news in college football. The biggest news of college football, we're going to bring you before the end of the show. After we talk to Andy Gresh, we're going to bring you a huge piece of news via video on this show later. You have to stick around for that. But first, let's go ahead and play this video of Lane Kiffin after he was hired by Ole Miss. Here he is at the airport. And there's a fan. He's taking a picture with the fan's baby. And the fan says, "Get you a burner phone."
Going on a
now, this is Lane's son.
On Monday.
This is really Lane Kiffin's son.
Where? Your dad is the new head coach of Ole Miss.
Let's go!
Your dad
Get your
is
burner
the
phone.
new head coach of Ole Miss.
Let's go!
Let's hop in here with the lexicon. Hey, get you the burner phone.
Get your burner phone. All right. So we may have to run that back at some point because I didn't set it up right. Get your burner phone. So he's at the airport. He arrives in the Ole Miss plane, by the way. They have the Ole Miss logo on the plane. And so he arrives, Lane Kiffin does at the airport, and he's greeted by fans. Everybody's doing that. It's like the Beatles now. LSU does that now. Everybody's doing it. I mean, I don't know. So there's a fan with a baby, and Kiffin takes a picture with the fan's baby. And then the fan, as he's getting the baby back, says to Kiffin, and we actually had a couple of different angles. See, we bring you everything. There's only one angle really on Twitter. We found another one where the fan says, "Hey, get your burner phone," right? And Kiffin says, "Okay." And then starts high-fiving people, which he's got to have a burner phone if it's a state school, of course. If only Hugh Freeze had a burner phone. Well, then again, Lane wouldn't be there. I think Hugh Freeze, as I said before, could end up in Memphis. But one thing I want to ask, and I know, Cam, you're probably efforting to get Andy Gresh on right now. We're going to have Andy Gresh on here in a second from CBS Radio. Looking forward to that. But I don't know if you saw that video, Cam, if you're not busy. But if you, and we might have to run this back. I don't know if we'll have time. We might have time after we visit with Andy. By the way, he's at Twitter at The Real Gresh, right? And we'll talk about that in a second. But as you looked at the video of Lane's son, and that's a real video, that was actually broadcast on the SEC network. All right. I'm thinking there's a good chance that might have been planned or staged in advance. Right? I don't know how old this kid is, 9 or something. To have that. So did you see the video, Cam, of Lane's son? I'm not so sure that's real. Like that was his just natural, organic reaction that his son, maybe he knew in advance it was going to go on. But before we get into that anymore, let's go out now to New England and visit with Andy Gresh, national radio host on CBS Sports Radio. And he's got the Gresh Show on WPRO in Providence. What's going on, Andy?
How are you, brother? I'm trying to not make it look like I'm in some sort of like bomb shelter or something like that. Where
are you at?
I'm actually in my bedroom because I figured that the dog wouldn't bark and be going crazy. And the last thing I want to do is ruin Sports by Brooks with having a golden retriever barking and going crazy in the background.
Well, anybody who's watching this show right now knows that we love dogs, since we have a lot of people on, and we actually have. I was just talking to Kirk Herbstreit, who's going to be coming on the show coming up. He's got golden retrievers, and I was demanding this time we've got to have your goldens on. So maybe next time we'll have it. We'll be introduced to your gold, because we have all the dogs from all of the people out there. It's a beautiful thing, and whether they're barking or not, who gives a damn, right?
There you go. I love my golden retriever. In fact, if I can here, hang on. Let me see if I can. Let me see. I got my cat.
Oh.
Yeah, who is sitting right here, and now he's running away because I put him on camera. This is no word of a lie, Brooks. We have a golden retriever, a cat, a python. Next door, we have chickens.
Wow.
And our neighbor down the road's got a pig.
Now, what's the cat's name?
Our cat's name is Kit because we couldn't come up with a name, so we just went with Kitty, and it turned into Kit, and there you go.
That's organic, as they call it. But now, hold on. Somebody's got chickens next door. Now, why exactly do they have chickens? Are we getting eggs from these chickens, or what's going on there?
Yes, look at you, the old cage-free farm fresh eggs, like in Seinfeld. Yeah, my neighbor is a old school Portuguese guy who woke up one day and said, "I need chickens." And sure enough, there's a chicken coop, and it's right on the other side of our fence. And he said, "Hey, man, I know these chickens are loud and, all that stuff." He's like, "Here you go. They're like the most delicious eggs." It's really crazy, the whole cage-free farm fresh deal. But, yeah, it's just I got one neighbor down the road who's an old school Italian and a neighbor next door who is old school Portuguese. So whenever I need some like sausage or anything like that, whether it's sweet Italian sausage or chorizo, I'm covered either way.
Wow, that's freaking awesome. Visiting with Andy Gresh, CBS Radio, WPRO in Providence. And want to ask you about college football first and talk to you about Memphis and Cincinnati. And we saw what happened with Norvell. What are your thoughts on Norvell going to Florida State? And who do you think might end up at Memphis? Maybe Hugh Freeze, possibly?
It's funny you mentioned Hugh Freeze. So, Brooks, I had a Liberty game this year, and Hugh Freeze has sold it like this is the place he's destined to be. They're pumping a ton of money into the program. So I don't think Hugh Freeze is necessarily going anywhere. And look, it would look bad for a guy on a redemption tour to then unplug in a situation to leave for a better opportunity. What I was hearing in Memphis while down there for the American Championship game was that they might go in-house. They think very highly of this staff across the board. There's a defensive coordinator there that I know the administration seems to really like. But look, this is something that the American Athletic Conference has been dealing with for a while now in terms of the coaches are going to leave because, look, Mike Norvell's a great coach. Memphis is a good job. He's making about 2.5 there, I think, maybe 2.8. You're going to go make $4.5 million in the state of Florida tax-free. So for these guys, it's a no-brainer. And he's 38 years old, Brooks. That's the crazy part about it is that Norvell's 38. This is a guy who, even if he goes and screws up at Florida State, he's going to have other opportunities down the road too. So why not jump now? I think there's a chance Memphis could stay in-house. I'm trying to think of who the next big kind of up-and-comer would be. And, this is where the American might start kind of cannibalizing themselves a little bit in terms of these coaching searches. But I think Memphis might stay in-house. Easy transition. Let's stick with what we've built.
I think one of the more underrated coaches and programs, and it seemingly has always been that way to a certain extent, but recently Luke Fickell at Cincinnati, I think really gets sold short. And his name should be in every conversation about vacancies. I mean, what's his situation? How come we're not hearing about him for Arkansas or one of these jobs?
Yeah, I think Fickell is smart enough, Brooks, to be picky. Like, the one thing about Bielema was I got to get out of Wisconsin and get away from Barry Alvarez and shit. He made a bad choice going to Arkansas. That was just a bad fit. I think Fickell, quite honestly, is more of the Ohio State, Penn State,
Michigan
those
State.
Kinds of those kinds of jobs. Right. I think Fickell is going to wait it out to sort of skate his lane, so to speak, and stay in a part of the country that he really digs and likes. Whereas a guy like Norvell, he was at Arizona State, he went to Memphis, he goes to Florida State. He's kind of one of those new age guys who I think can do it in different ways in different parts of the country. Whereas Fickell, I think, is along the lines of hey, I like Northeastern football. I like building it with big people. I like having the power running game. I just think it's a perfect fit for Fickell at this point. And Cincinnati's one of those schools too, Brooks, where maybe not a sleeping giant, but 50,000 seat stadium, committed to excellence. Their main rival is going to be UCF for a couple of years. You can win there at a pretty high level. And I think Fickell's time will come. It's just a matter of how fickle will he be and what his next job is.
How fickle? That's a good one, man. Visiting
Thank
with
you. I knew you'd like that.
Andy Gresh of CBS. I really enjoy your show, by the way, Saturdays, driving around on CBS Radio. It's awesome. And, of course, WPRO, you're in New England. And want to talk to you about the Patriots. And first off, why do you think, or maybe they are, but to me, one of the overriding stories of the Patriots situation, even more so now as they're kind of in decline, especially on offense, and what's been happening is, why are more people not speculating or talking about the prospect of Brady leaving?
Well, because I think we're so ingrained here,
right,
that regardless of the problem, they figure it out. And that includes Brady and his contract. And, you know, it's funny, Brooks, I've had so many issues over the years with kind of the Brady camp and the way they get information out there. The problem is the dad talks. The dad is talking about a 42-year-old man, right? Who is one of the most famous people on the planet right now. He's married to someone more famous than him. And I think a part of the issue is the dad can't stop talking. So he'll tell people locally, he'll tell people nationally that, well, Tom still wants to do this, Tom still wants to do that. Like, he's speaking for him. And what we've learned is that the old man will put it out there that, hey, you know, this could end badly. And yet Tom does everything but act like someone who wants it to end badly. Sure, right. You want me to take a little less money? I'll take less money. So I think, honestly, Brooks, we're just conditioned here that if it's Brady, it'll work out. So I think there is I'll believe it when I see it element to everything. Whereas nationally, when you're not in the belly of the beast and you're not following along what Tom Sr. has said and what, you know, some of the Brady people are putting out there, it's just really hard to believe that Brady would get so upset because there are so few weapons around him that he would actually unplug and go somewhere else and start over. I mean, think of that process when you think about it. Where would that guy go? Everybody says, well, just bring a coach with him. There's so much more infrastructure here that people don't get to know about that Tom Brady relies on. I mean, Brooks, think about it. It took us almost 3 years to figure out that Alex Guerrero was even in the building in Gillette Stadium before that whole thing blew up.
TB12, all that stuff that's going on, you know, how he's intertwined there. Is that something that he could just drop and leave? Or, I mean, there's a building there, right?
I mean, I think it's the whole, he set up his business structure. There are people that are going to be in charge of that. And that's kind of Alex Guerrero's deal. Here's the thing that I worry about, Brooks, and you of all people will get a kick out of this. I'm really worried that for people in New England, I'll say it from this perspective, right? That the Lord and football savior, Thomas Edward Brady Jr., may end up in 3 or 4 years being like Billy Mays for Orange Clean or Phil Swift for Flex Seal, and that you're going to turn on Nesson after a Red Sox game at midnight, and it's going to be, hi, everyone, this is Tom Brady for the TB12 method. Right, and then there's your half-hour infomercial, and the guy that everybody around here grew up loving as their Lord and football savior turns into like a commercial pitch man in half-hour increments like he's Susan Powder back in the 80s.
Wow. That's something to think. You know, I just think of and man, I'm old. This is a really old guy reference, and you might not be old enough to remember. I think of Johnny Unitas in a San Diego Chargers uniform. You ever seen that before? Those old pictures of him?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
That's what I think of. I may have to do like a meme Photoshop where I put, I'm sure that'll look great, right? But put Tom Brady's face on that. But what's bottom line? You're saying he's going to finish with the Pats. Is that, or is he not?
My gut feel is that he finishes, because here's the thing, right? I did this exercise the other day on my show and tried to figure out where this guy could actually go, where it would make sense, right? Because you got to figure, you got to have money, you got to have an offensive-minded coach, and in theory, you would have either good wide receivers who fit into the existing salary structure of whatever team, or you have what I would call grizzled young vets. guys who are in the third year of a fifth-year deal, and Brady comes in for 2 years and try to save the day, right? Maybe that's Tampa Bay because the old general manager or a guy who worked in the front office for New England is the GM down there. And you have Bruce Arians, who I think at his age would be like, yeah, you're going to give me Tom Brady? Hell, I'll learn the whole new offensive philosophy to get someone like him. But otherwise, Brooks, there aren't that many fits. That's why I keep thinking and coming back to if Brady's going to play, he's going to play here because it's the element of it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. But that said, they need to put some weaponry around him and they need to start protecting the guy because at the end of the year, he might just wake up and say, you know what, to hell with this. I've had a great career. No one's going to dog me out. So what, I didn't play till 45. He was still moving around great at 42 years old. I mean, you remember Vinny Testaverde with the Jets, the year they went to the AFC title game. He had rigor mortis at 44.
Right.
Brady is still pretty spry at 42. I think he can make the infomercial case that the TB12 method really works.
It's going to be on that, down in the Everglades in one of those boats with the Flex Seal boat or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Imagine if he goes DDP yoga and goes on Shark Tank to pitch TB12 just to get a bunch of money and to get it out there, right? Like that guy, Kevin O'Leary, would literally pull the money out of his pocket and throw it at Brady when he walked in the room.
All right, I'm going to give you a big fat curveball on this one. We're visiting with Andy Gresh of CBS Sports Radio on the weekends, on Saturdays, of course, WPRO in Providence, 6 to 9 Eastern time, weekdays. Steve Belichick, is he the next head coach of the Patriots?
He is not. And there's one thing that I think is very definitive in New England is that if there's anybody on the staff that's going to get it, it's going to be McDaniels. And Brooks, here's the part of this that people don't talk about. Robert Kraft is 78 years old. He's going to be segueing away, whether on earth or not, at some point. Jonathan Kraft has taken over. He's been in the pipeline forever as the president of the team. He's going to put his stamp on this organization. And unless Steve Belichick becomes the Das Wunderkind and is his dad 2.0 with a little more polish and spit shine, I think that when the time comes, the coaching search needs to be made. Robert turns and says to Jonathan, this is yours. And no one has talked to Jonathan Kraft about what he's thinking in all of this, because you got to think, you've been an executive, right?
Yes.
There's the whole hit by a bus theory, right? If God forbid something happened and people get hit by a bus, what would I do? No one has seen that file from Jonathan Kraft.
Right.
So I think it's going to be someone that he can work with in concert, he's got that ability to hit the reset button on the coaching search. And I think as long as Bill wants to do it, the job is his. But when the time comes that he doesn't want to, that's going to be Jonathan Kraft's call in the beginning of him shaping the organization the way he wants to.
Do you think Bill is trying to set it up, though, for Steve?
I don't.
Okay.
Because I think they're different people. And I think the kid, while it's really creepy that he sounds like the old man. I don't know if you've heard.
We'll have to get that audio and video on the show. It's amazing.
Like, it's freaky how much he sounds like the dad. He hasn't had the road that the old man did. You know, when you think of Bill Belichick as a special teams coach in 1975, making $4,000 or whatever, and being an errand boy, I think it's I think what they'll want is somebody who's really gone through the ranks and kind of worked their way up. That's why McDaniels is plausible as a possibility. The other thing, too, is that, you know, Belichick's the GM. So will they want to put someone in that role who kind of picks the coach that they know they can work with? Whenever Bill decides to hang it up, it's going to be fascinating because it really will be a turn-the-page moment on the Patriots organization.
Visiting with Andy Gresh, CBS Sports Radio, WPRO in Providence. How much longer these are all ridiculously hard questions that nobody knows the answer to. How much longer is Bill going to coach the Pats?
I think he's got 3 more years in him, and I do think that even if Brady unplugs at the end of the year, I think Belichick still enjoys the process of putting together football teams. And when you go back to this year and you look at, why is the O-line struggling? He signed 2 veteran guys who walked away on him, in Jared Veldier and Brian Schwenke, who would have been able to fit right away. And instead, it was scramble mode. And I think Belichick enjoys seasons like this. And this is very weird to say because they're still winning. They're not out of it. But there is an element of the grind, right? There's the element of, hey, we're going to find a different way to kind of skin the cat here. And we're going to figure out how to win football games. I think that's what gives that guy blood flow. So until he gets sick and tired of putting together football teams, I think he's going to coach and he's going to be around. I personally don't think the Brady part of it really factors into his decision. In fact, it may embolden him more to say, I want to prove I can do it, but I'm not sure about that. I think people have way overblown the whole, well, Bill's here and Brady isn't, and Bill's, all that stuff. I think that's hogwash. Those guys are on different timelines, and they enjoy, I think, the process very differently, independent of each other.
Visiting with Andy Gresh, our remaining moments for CBS Sports Radio, WPRO. So you talked about blood flow. Is that going to flow to the Super Bowl for the Patriots this year? I mean, do they? Because people are eulogizing them today. It's over, right? I mean, forget about the bad calls, right? They're looking at Brady, and I mean, Brady's kind of buried himself to a certain extent. But is this team going to suddenly turn it around offensively and do what it takes to get to the Super Bowl?
No, but what I think they're going to do, though, Brooks, is they're going to end up in an AFC title game, in part because they're going to get the bye, so they're going to get rest. So you hope that you get like center back like Ted Karras. That's a guy that you need. You got a little guy in there in Ferentz who isn't getting the job done. So I think what happens is they're good enough to get a bye. Belichick and crew will get in the lab. They'll get healthy. They'll get in the lab, and they'll say, how do we beat this team that's right in front of us? And that's all they'll focus on. It won't be about the big picture. It'll be finding a way to get through a week. And then they're in an AFC title game, probably in Baltimore, and at that point, all bets are off. Can they pull the proverbial rabbit out of the hat? This team, Brooks, is like the 0-1 team. Give me enough offense to survive. Play great defense, win on special teams, mix in some trick plays, and try to be fundamentally sound. And they're going to have to get a little lucky along the way. Do I think they're going to the Super Bowl? Probably not with what I've seen. But you put them in an AFC title game with a great quarterback and a great coach, and they got a puncher's chance to maybe get there. Maybe.
By the way, I'm going to shoot my shot. Celtics are going to go to the NBA Finals. I think people are sleep. I don't know why they're sleeping on him, but I really like the. I don't really like Kemba that much, but I think this is Brad Stevens kind of a team, and I think that they're going to go to the NBA Finals out of these. What are your thoughts on that?
If they get a big guy, and look, like a Steven Adams type, like they need a presence in the middle.
They really miss Al,
They do, and you know what? I'm wondering if Al Horford Brooks is sitting there and going, "Damn, I should have stayed with these guys." Instead of going to Philadelphia and dealing with that group of knuckleheads. I completely agree. Horford would have been a perfect fit. But do people love Kemba? Around here they do, because he ain't Kyrie.
Right.
And Kyrie just took a giant dump on the organization, made Celtic fans really bitter towards him, towards the team a little bit as well. But they can get there. There's no question. They just need the right kind of big. And I don't even know if Trader Danny has the ability to find the right kind of big. But a lot like the Patriots, put them in an East Final. And to your point, put your four guys that are very similar on the floor and let them go out there and just score all over the place and see what happens. I love what you're putting down, though. And I think the Brad Stevens is overrated crowd has shut up pretty quickly.
Yeah. To me, that's the X factor. I'm not saying the most talented, but he thrives in that situation. That's his MO. That's who he is. So, we'll see what happens, but it's going to be, the Celtics to me are a fascinating team. They're the personalities in the mix and all that stuff. And then you brought up the Kyrie context. That's a big part of it. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the East. Man, I can't thank you enough for stopping by. I really appreciate it, Andy. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad we got to finally connect after all these years of Twitter DMs and stuff. I'm a big fan of you, and quite honestly, I'm glad you're back. Wherever you were hiding, whatever bunker you were in, wherever you were, I'm happy to have you back. I think America is too. You're a voice that's needed in sports, and thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Should be like an agent. You're unbelievable.
I don't know contracts, though, bro. I'm a hype man. That's what I am.
You don't need contracts.
I'm the rapper. I'm the guy that goes behind the rapper, going like this, jumping on stage, getting people hyped up. There we go.
That's awesome, man. Thanks again, Andy. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Brooks. I'll see you.
That's Andy Gresh, CBS Sports Radio. And what did I tell you about that guy? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. What I love about that guy is I asked him ridiculous questions about the Patriots. Not that they're not interesting. I think that's what I wonder. When I see Steve Belichick there, I hear him talk. We're going to have to run some video of him. If you haven't seen or heard him, because he's so much like his father, but looks so different, because he's so much younger, right? Of course. But I just can't get that out of my mind. And Bill just kind of seems a little, at times he does. Earlier this season, he kind of seemed a little different, a little more active in what he's doing. That may have to do with, the whole defensive side of the ball, trying to firm up that situation and gain control over it, delineate roles amongst the coaches with Mayo, of course, kind of leading the way. But that's the kind of stuff I really zero in on, is what his role is. How much longer is Bill going to coach? That whole thing. That's what fascinates me. And that's why we do this show the way we do it. Everybody goes out there and just talks about all the games that you saw and I saw. We're all on the couch, and it's great. We can talk about it, and we can do the betting lines. We do that. We have great guests on the show, and we break the games down with people. Absolutely. But I like to go further and look at kind of the off the field angles that affect on the field, so you're ahead of the game. That's what we really focus on. I don't want to just do the same thing everybody else is doing, but I don't want to do something different just for the sake of it. So like with college football over the weekend, we all watched those games. You probably did. If you're watching this show, you're probably not tuning in to find out who won, or I don't know, find out how my fantasy league team did. But so what are we talking about today? We're talking about the future of guys like, guys like Joe Brady. Joe Brady is the most underrated story in college football this year, and he is the most influential guy, you could argue, in college football this season. Joe Brady. And I think it's 50-50 you know who he is. If you're a college football fan, you might know who he is. He is the passing game coordinator, wide receivers coach for LSU. LSU brought him in this year to create a new offensive scheme with Steve Ensinger, who's been there forever. And Joe Burrow last year didn't do anything on offense. This year, different guy. Obviously, he's a great talent. Goes without saying. If he's not sorry, I'm looking at something over here. If he's not the first pick by the Bengals, I guess nobody will be surprised, but the Bengals are going to take him. So I want to play some video, though, from Joe Brady. So there he is. He's the guy that kind of created this rebirth of LSU as we know it. And nobody's talking about him. And nobody's talking about what his status is after this season. Well, he was asked about that on Saturday, and we actually have video that I haven't seen anywhere of him addressing what's going to happen.
Future here next year?
Absolutely.
Yeah, spoken to LSU about that?
I'm not going to comment on that stuff. Right now, I'm just going to enjoy some time with the guy.
You can go ahead and play that again. This is Joe Brady, and he's asked.
Next year?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah,
Spoken to LSU about that?
I'm not going to comment on that stuff. Right now, I'm just going to enjoy some time with the guys.
So Joe Brady was addressing a question, somebody asking him if he was going to be back with LSU next year. And he said, absolutely. They asked him, have you had any discussions about that? And he said, didn't want to talk about it. Don't want to cause a distraction. Ed Ogeron has said that they've already talked to him preliminarily. I've heard, my sources have told me that they're already putting financial terms together for him. And there had been some talk about him going to Texas as offensive coordinator for Tom Herman. And I can tell you that they will cut the power to the Baton Rouge Children's Hospital before they let Joe Brady go become the offensive coordinator for Tom Herman, wherever Tom Herman is. But Texas being that school, there's no chance they will do anything. And dude, if I'm Joe Brady's agent, you talk about leverage. I'm not so sure he'll ever have more leverage than right now. He came out of nowhere. He was a little known assistant for the New Orleans Saints. They bring him in. And, you know, the big thing to understand and recognize, if you don't know, is Joe Burrow started out at Ohio State, transferred to LSU. He's an Ohio guy. And they didn't do it. It was typical LSU last year. So what are you saying, Cam, about this? We don't have any time, actually. Cam, we'll talk about it later. Cam Smith, our producer, doing a great job today with the video. We're going to follow that Joe Brady story for you. Man, if I was an agent right now, that's the guy you would want to represent. Talk about having a hammer. We'll see what happens with LSU. I'm just fascinated that more people, it's all about Joe Burrow, as it should be to an extent. But Joe Burrow would not be doing what he's doing this year if last year was any indication. I mean, he didn't just become this great player overnight like that. What he's doing this year is unprecedented. If you don't know, he's got the highest completion percentage of all time, almost 80% for LSU of all teams. So pretty remarkable. Great job by our producer, Cam Smith. Thanks to Andy Gresh and Arash Markazi, our guests. We'll be back tomorrow, and we'll talk more about coaching vacancies in college football. We'll have it all for you right here. And I'm live in Los Angeles. My name is Brooks Melchior. So long. This has been Sports by Brooks on Fancred.